What's up, everybody? Hello, Vanguardians. Welcome back to the show. Got a great live stream for you guys planned today. A lot of awesome topics to go over. And we're going to be welcoming back to the program friend of the show, Tyrell Ventura. Super excited to chat with Tyrell, as always, one of our favorite guests and good friends of the show. How you doing, Zach?
Doing really, really well. A little bit of a cold front coming into Kansas City. Was walking around this morning. I was like, holy shit, it does not feel like we're dealing with global warming anymore. So I can pacify myself for the day and be like, hey, everything's fine. This feels like a normal spring day. It's not 95 degrees outside. It's just normal 70 spring weather. But that's your weather report from the Weather Guard. Shout out to all of our patrons for keeping this show off the ground, up and running. We appreciate you. That's why we begin and end every live stream with a shout out to you. Shout out to everybody that listens, comments, hits the like button, subscribe button, notification bell. You guys know the deal. You're all comrades in our hearts, but a special thank you to those individuals keeping us alive and afloat via Patreon. But yeah, echoing your sentiment, super stoked to talk to a good friend of the show, Tyrell, today. We've got a lot of juicy shit to get into, a lot of big news, fun stuff. Going to be a good show.
Yeah, really excited to get Tyrell in here. Should be dropping into the stream in the next 10 minutes or so. But yeah, you guys know what's up. The Patreon link is in the description. So if you're trying to join the Patreon community, hit that up. Really appreciate the support, guys. Would not be able to do this show without you. But yeah, thanks everyone that's tuned in thus far. Looking forward to seeing some more comrades trickle into the chat. Looking forward to hearing you guys' opinions on all of today's stories, because we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Like I said, one thing that I specifically wanted to start the show a little bit by talking about and spotlighting is the fact that it does look like Biden's Board of Disinformation Governance, also known as the Ministry of Truth, that it's been popularly dubbed, it does look like it's being paused, quote unquote, basically shutting down. That's what I'm going to assume from that. But yeah, a lot of people are reacting to this. Homeland Security pausing newly created Disinformation Governance Board after its leader came under online attack. I did want to react to a video of Krystal and Kyle actually talking a little bit about this that I think we can start off with. Just the first couple minutes, because they get into a piece written by Taylor Lorenz of the Washington Post, who we were actually just talking about on this show not too long ago, after her very infamous story concerning the libs of TikTok. So she's in the news once again. I'm excited to hear your reaction to this as well, Zach.
But I'm interested to get your reaction. Okay. I know you covered on your show, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, was creating this, they called it Misinformation Governance Board, or maybe Disinformation Governance Board.
Disinformation.
Whatever. Disinformation Governance Board. And they put at the head of it someone who's firmly entrenched in the sort of like resistance liberal mode of politics, Nina Jankowicz. It led to a huge backlash, both to the board itself, because people were like, okay, Ministry of Truth, that doesn't sound great. And then as you dug into who this woman is and what she's been about, she has herself peddled some misinformation or disinformation, especially with regards to, she bought into all the Russiagate stuff, the Alpha Bank connection with the Trump servers, the Hunter Biden thing.
She was like defending having that censored on social media.
Yes, and saying that this was, that this should be viewed as a Trump campaign product. That's what she said.
That's beyond the pale.
Yes, and she's offered some terrible ideas, like allowing blue checks on Twitter to edit other people's tweets, which is like really one of the worst ideas I have ever heard.
Imagine letting me edit people's tweets. Like, I would just put like fart noises and emojis of like camels and shit. Like, I would just fuck around all day.
I don't know what's going on in the brain that came up with that particular gem of an idea.
Krystal's like, don't embarrass me, Kyle. People know we're together now.
A lot of that critique came from the right, but there were also people like us who are on the left. There were also people who are
CNN criticized that shit. Dana Bash criticized that shit.
Dana Bash did a very actually hard-hitting interview with the DHS, the head of DHS, pushing him on like, well, what is this thing actually? What does it do?
She was like, what if Trump came up with this? Would you be cool with him picking somebody to fill the role?
Yeah, sure. And we're like, no, you wouldn't be. Like, you're just lying right now.
Fucking Seb Gorka as the head of like a disinformation board. Are you kidding me?
Right. So anyway, the criticism was actually ideologically across the board, even with liberals like Dana Bash. Now, there were plenty to also defend her and defend the idea and all of that. But the way the Washington Post and Taylor Lorenz specifically covered this story and the fact that after a backlash, the Biden administration has now put a pause on, ended basically probably forever, the idea of this board. Rather than just covering that significant news for what it is and accurately portraying it, she decided to go all in on how terrible this right-wing coordinated attack on Nina Jankowicz was. The article was so disingenuous and so it was extremely ideological too. I mean, really, if it was going to be anything, it would be an opinion piece. But even then, it doesn't really pass muster because it's just not honest or truthful. So her headline was, "How the Biden administration let right-wing attacks derail its disinformation efforts." She says a pause of the DHS newly created board comes after its head, Nina Jankowicz, was the victim of coordinated online attacks as the administration struggled to respond. She goes on to say, Jankowicz's experience is a prime example of how the right-wing internet apparatus operates, where far-right influencers attempt to identify a target, present a narrative, and then repeat mischaracterizations across social media and websites with the aim of discrediting and attacking anyone who seeks to challenge them. It also shows what happens when institutions, when confronted with these attacks, don't respond effectively. She does not include much in the way of making the case that the criticism of Jankowicz was unfounded. She does completely ignores that there were any non-right-wing voices of dissent here either. And also, I mean, look, it's very rare that the government actually is responsive to public criticism. In this instance, they were, and that public criticism led to get to the correct side of an issue. How's that a bad thing?
You read the piece to me, and it made me miss the old school neutrality, both sidesism journalism. Because I was like, even that.
I like how Kyle says that Krystal read the piece to him. I'm picturing him like laying in bed, going to sleep at night, and Krystal's like reading out of the Washington Post, like his bedtime story.
That's actually really wholesome, though. If you imagine that that's how it goes, it's like, all right, dear, let's get into bed now, and then the time for me to read you a story about the Ministry of Truth. You know. No, it's not 1984. This is from the Washington Post. No, you're going to like this, Kyle. Buckle up. Yeah. And just to interject a little bit on the kind of the substance of what's being criticized here, I think it speaks to a number of things. One, the priorities of the most delusional of the liberal class, right? Like, I don't know if you followed the wave of like defensive op-eds, like op-eds trying to defend Jankowicz, but it was not, this one wasn't alone, right? There was a piece calling it like that was like the crush of sexist anti-Semitic abuse driving women from high profile positions to like kind of come to her aid, and all these kinds of ridiculous things that wanted to tackle absolutely none of the substance of any of her faults, or writ large, like the fact that she was walking into a job that frankly, a lot of people just would not ever approve of, regardless of how unqualified or qualified she happened to be for it. And I think the fact that Biden and his administration is deciding to walk away from this shows, one, how sweepingly unpopular it is, two, how unpopular his entire presidency is. And so he can't risk really pissing the people off even more than he already has right before what is going to be. And the Democrats have already fessed up to this, a devastating midterm election cycle for them. There might be a sprinkling of wins for people that we would call progressives. You know, we just saw a lot of good turnout in Pennsylvania, you know, with Fetterman and Summer Lee, both getting victories. There was one other victory that escapes me right now, but there was a good turnout. A girl that reads to me, I'd sell my soul for that. LOL. Maybe you could just try like eharmony.com or something. I'm kidding. Yeah, but I think that one, this is a huge revelation in one, just how unpopular the Biden presidency is. They can't take any more else. They're willing to back away from this. And they know that they can't manipulate the fucking information into helping them win the election. What's so fucked up about all this, what's so depraved about all of this, is that what they are really trying to do is meddle in the election. That's what they're trying to do. After the Democrats melted down for years and years, literally years and years, about the Russia manipulating our information and all this kind of stuff, the Democrats were like, oh, hey, that's actually a really good idea. Let us try and figure out how we can do that to manipulate all of the elections to benefit us. Right. And, you know, that's what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop story, which Krystal mentioned in the intro to the story we're talking about. And it's happened time and time again. And it also goes back to what Rand Paul was saying when he absolutely savaged the concept of the ministry of truth on the Senate hearing or whatever, when he was like, how many times has the US government been wrong? They've been the greatest purveyor of disinformation of all fucking time. They're the biggest propaganda machine on earth. Why would we ever allow them to be our arbiters of information? And it honestly, to many people, I know this is going to sound like, not lefty of me to say, but to a lot of people, having a ministry of truth, having an arbiter of what you can and cannot say and learn and read, that just is un-American to so many people. They just think it's fundamentally what we're opposed to. So anybody trying to get something like that across, I think, has a tough hill to climb. Like, sure, their most ardent supporters would get behind it, kind of like how the Christian right, would get behind like a cleansing of our libraries of anything that's like pornographic or violent or whatever. The neoliberal order will get behind anything that they find to do on social media or whatever.
Right. And I think part of what's so hilarious about their whole rollout of this is that they seemingly didn't put much thought into how it would come off, like the optics of this whole operation, because we have to remember, and this is something that Krystal points out later in the show, but it's not like they chose someone to head this thing or be the face of it that would come off as super neutral, super objective, like you would want if you're actually going to start a fucking ministry of truth. No, this is who they chose.
Is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious.
All right, I'm not going to make you guys watch the full thing this time like I did last time.
Tried to play it like 5 times the first time it came out. I was like, why are you poisoning our minds, Gavin?
Oh, it's so cringe. I literally can't even get through it either. But yeah, that's who they chose to head this thing. And again, instead of writing a piece about the fact that, holy shit, our government's trying to create a literal ministry of truth and now has luckily been pressured to pause it, instead of writing an article about that, Taylor Lorenz instead chose to write an article about what a victim Nina Jankowicz is, this extremely cringe elite liberal woman that we just showed you the clip of, who was chosen to be the face of the board of disinformation. So, again, I'm sure she did receive some ugly comments on Twitter and harassment and stuff like that. But let's be honest, that's not the real story here. This is a powerful person, a literal elite liberal. I'm sorry, but I don't really care about the fact that she got some mean comments online from Twitter trolls. I care a little bit more about the fact that my government just tried to start a literal ministry of truth. And again, luckily is pausing it. So, I guess credit to Biden and credit also to everyone that cyberbullied the fuck out of Nina Jankowicz, because it seems like they got the right result here, right? The pausing of this disinformation board. Does look like we got a super chat from Gigantic Anime Fan. Thanks so much for the $5. Hey guys, did you ever get a chance to look into the WHO treaty that Jimmy covered like you said you would? Sorry, Gigantic Anime Fan, I have not had a chance to look into that yet. Super busy. I will make a note to do so though.
Yeah, this just makes me feel like I'm back in class again. It's like, Zach, did you do your homework? Unfortunately, I did not do my homework, but I did save a really funny tweet for you guys that basically sums up my entire reaction to everybody melting down about the cyberbullying. Now, this is an infamous tweet from Tyler, the creator, before he went through his PC evolution. But this is one of my favorite tweets of all time, so I just keep it on deck. And honestly, whenever I'm getting in my own feelings about something that somebody says to me in the comment section, I just look at this and I'm like, you know what? Shut the fuck up, Zach. Stop being a little bitch. No, how the fuck is cyberbullying real? Just walk away from the screen, like, close your eyes. Like, that's a real good sentiment. That's how I feel whenever these rich assholes try and melt down and mauled about how hard it is to actually be like receptive and to the response of the people that you're able to reach through your massively successful media career. But anyway, yeah, sorry about that, Gigantic Anime Fan. And we will look into that. But if you also just want to like provide us a link to whatever you want us to watch or consume in the chat, we'll find it, and that'll make it a lot easier for us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and it does look like our special guest for today, Tyrell, is here. Before we introduce him to the stream, quick shout out also to Zedra 89. Really appreciate the $20 donation. That's super generous. Thank you so much. The Epstein Maxwell story feels dead in the water in corporate news outlets and even on independent media. The news cycle moves quickly from Ukraine to Johnny Depp. That's so true, by the way. So true. I remember like a couple months ago, everyone was talking about Ukraine. It seems like a lot less people are talking about Ukraine now. If anything, more people are, talking about the Johnny Depp trial, as you mentioned. So that kind of shows how, short our attention spans are, for sure. Have you guys heard of Epstein pal is Jean-Luc Brunel's death. I feel like I did read something about that. Do you know anything about Jean-Luc Brunel, Zach?
I know about Louis Boonwell, and I know about. I was like, oh, did Godard die? That's what I heard when I started like fucking thinking. I was like, no, I don't know about Epstein pal Jean-Luc Brunel. I'm sorry. Yeah, I imagine that there's a bunch of people that they're just fucking sniping off at the end of the rope to just cut off any dead ends or connection to like the most powerful families. That's usually how it goes down. Just. That's how the rich stay rich and out of and avoid prosecution. But anyway, thank you so much for the $20 donation, though, Zedra. Really appreciate it and super excited to get our special guest on air.
Yeah, maybe he knows something about Jean-Luc Brunel. Anyway, without further ado, I did want to welcome to the stream our good friend of the show, Tyrell Ventura. What's up, man? How you doing?
How is everybody today? It's a pleasure to always be on with you guys.
Yeah, great to see you, man.
Absolutely. Let everyone know what you've been up to, Tyrell, and also feel free to introduce yourself in case anyone listening doesn't know who you are.
I am Tyrell Ventura, the former co-host of Watching the Hawks, which was on RT America. Before that, closed up shop, and now I'm kind of arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder with my dad, former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, as we're getting ready to launch some new exciting things together as father and son in the next few weeks. We're putting together, hasn't launched yet, but we're putting together a great new kind of Substack hub for everything Jesse Ventura called Die First Then Quit, which is kind of Jesse's. It's a mantra from the Navy SEALs from his UDT SEAL days that he's kind of looking at now, saying, well, I'm 70 years old, getting into the sunset to my life, but I'm not going to stop talking till I'm done. So hence Die First Then Quit. But you'll hear more about that as the days and weeks progress. We're in the process of building that up. We've talked about it a few times on Clubhouse and a few other things like that. But other than that, man, just keeping busy, trying to stay up on everything. I haven't been in the news cycles a while. I'm paying attention, but it's just been like, got a lot of crazy, wonderful things happening in the personal life right now, and just enjoying the beginning of summer here in Minnesota. But ready to, roll up the sleeves and talk a little politics, talk a little disinformation, and have some fun with you guys today.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. Well, congratulations on the good shit that you mentioned. And yeah, we've been enjoying the fuck out of a good Midwestern spring, right? Like, no love for the Midwest on the internet. It's all coastal, but Tyrell knows what's up. Middle America, the heartland. There's a lot of good shit here.
Oh, without a doubt, man, without a doubt. And look, at the end of the day, I always like when they refer to Main Street, right? Like, okay, we're somewhere in Main Street as opposed to the coast, and everyone's trying to get at Main Street, but they only really pay attention to us during election season, when then suddenly, states like Iowa and Ohio and places like that suddenly become like so popular to talk about, and we got to get the pulse of what's happening there. Well, you could have checked in last year before you decided to start running and begging for votes. But no, so we're here, we're broadcasting, we're having fun. What's on the docket today, guys? I'm excited.
Well, I really want to get your reaction, Tyrell, to this disinformation board story that we were getting into a little bit before you showed up. And just as a note to the audience, too, make sure to stay tuned and hit that subscribe, because we will hopefully be having Governor Ventura on the show as well soon to talk a little bit about these future projects that you referenced, Tyrell. So super excited for that. And again, everyone, make sure to stay tuned for another interview with the governor. But yeah, let's jump right into this. Again, just want to hear your reaction, Tyrell, to the news of this disinformation board, as it has been dubbed, the Ministry of Truth Online. Not only what was your reaction to that, but also now it's seeming end. It's pausing and hopeful, complete end.
Well, it was interesting to me because I'd lived through, as probably some of us have, or I'd lived through the creation of the Department of Homeland Defense right after 9/11. And I remember it kind of gave me the same vibes as when that was created, because we're all kind of looking at each other like, Homeland, when did we start using that language in the vernacular? And like, when did that, because I always associated the word homeland with like, and I hate to always use that metaphor, but I always associated that with like Nazi Germany when I was in history class, like homeland, when did we become a homeland? And so it kind of hit me the same way, where I was like, so you're creating a disinformation board. Okay, well, why? And the thing that like got me about it was it's interesting seeing what happened to with Nina Jankowicz and her stepping down because of what was going on with cyberbullying and things like that. Because to me, your average everyday person, when they're online or using social media, they're affected more by cyberbullying and being like abused by people online than they are by disinformation from some, mysterious foreign entity or group. And so if the government wants to step in and say, hey, we want to combat disinformation, why aren't they stepping up and saying, hey, let's actually knuckle down and try to, really put some clamps down on the amount of cyberbullying that we're seeing every day, the specific things that happened to this lady. Instead, it's always this like grand, thing of, well, we got to stop disinformation from coming in from Russia or from China or from things like that. Most average US citizens, I'd imagine, don't give a shit about that. They can kind of see through it. I mean, when you look at like what they pointed to back during Russiagate, it was what, like maybe they spent, I think it was like a Russian company spent like what, $1 million, $600,000 or some, small piddly number to put out some bullshit Facebook, memes and things like that like didn't affect anybody's voting at the end of the day. People had already made up their minds. Plus that was going up against the almost $1 billion spent on social media advertising from the two-party dictatorship. So at the end of the day, it was kind of one of those things, I'm looking at it going like, that's not what affects everyday people. What affects everyday people is what they deal with on a day-to-day basis when they go online, especially women or minorities or people like that, who, if they speak out suddenly about any subject, suddenly they're getting rape and death threats every day in their inbox. I saw it happen firsthand to my former co-host Tabitha Wallace, like the moment we started doing the show, and that, yeah, we're on TV, so you expect that kind of thing, but that happens to so many people on a daily basis who aren't celebrities, who are just trying to use social media, whether they're speaking out about something or just putting the recipe up. I guarantee you anybody online, especially if you're a woman, has gotten like a rape or a death threat or one of those things like, ooh, baby, I want to do X, Y, and Z to you. That affects people a hell of a lot more than a foreign entity overseas. Where's the government? Where's our, our leaders saying, hey, let's try to put a stop to that? Where's our social media companies stepping up saying, that affects people on a daily basis and has a much more profound, ugly psychological effect on people? I mean, disinformation, you solve that by just teaching critical thinking skills. You solve that by saying, hey, here's what we're saying. Here's why, this counter argument is bullshit or what somebody made up is bullshit. And you move on. People are smart enough. You just got to educate them to that. They want to be told the truth. They want to know what the actual reality is. And they, but at the end of the day, or combat algorithms. I mean, my God, like if I hit the wrong thing on YouTube and accidentally like, oh shit, I didn't realize I just clicked on a Ben Shapiro video. I suddenly am inundated with like, 1,000 Ben Shapiro and like crazy right-wing shit. And that happens like that. Let's go after those algorithms, rather than being worried about whether or not China's flooding us with pro-China sentiment or anti-US sentiment. I don't know.
And also, let's not forget that the algorithms, not only do they promote guys like that, they also bury independent media like us and other outlets that are actually trying to speak truth to power and expose corruption and bring an anti-duopoly message, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's a form of censorship as far as I'm concerned in and of itself. And of course, the government's not concerned about that. They want to further that trend. They want to further censor independent news that's speaking truth to power, anti-corporate sentiments online, because the internet is increasingly just a gentrified corporate cesspool, essentially. And Tyrell, you're coming to this from an interesting perspective. You mentioned the fear of foreign governments disseminating misinformation. As you referenced, you worked at RT America up until very recently. Can you just talk a little bit about that and kind of talk about some of the claims that have been made about RT America and the quote unquote disinformation that was being fostered there?
Well, I mean, I can speak to my experiences there, and in my experiences there, I was never told what to say or how to say it, or to push a pro-Russia line or anything like that. Now, granted, when you look, like if you go to like the USA Today or Wall Street Journal or New York Times, CNN, things like that, there's an unspoken kind of they don't have to say, hey, always be pro-US. It's just kind of what pro-corporate US or pro one of the two parties. It's just that unspoken thing. I didn't really feel that a lot when I was working at RT America, like an unspoken, like, don't say anything bad about Russia or don't do anything like that. I mean, I was right before we went off the air, I had spoken out vehemently against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as did my father, simply because at the end of the day, whether and I know there's all these people out there that can find justifications. You can find justifications for anything, but at the end of the day, anybody who starts a war, I'm somebody who's very, very pro-peace. and so I'm against any bloodshed or any war, whether it's, the U.S. supplying arms to Saudi Arabia and Yemen for the war going on there, or Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or anything like that. Yeah, you can find 1,000,001 justifications, but there's never to me a good justification for war unless you're the one being invaded. Unless it's coming into your neighborhood and an outside aggressor's coming into your country or neighborhood, that's a justification for pushing back. But ultimately, there's no good justification for that. So I was speaking out on the channel on that. Now, I think Chris Hedges wrote a brilliant piece. Would folks like my dad or Chris Hedges or myself, who spoke out against that invasion, would we have had RT America stayed on the air? Would we have stayed, and would we have kept our jobs? I don't know. Given what we've heard about Russia's reaction internally to people dissenting against the war there, I don't know if we'd have kept our jobs. But at the end of the day, we did, it did shut down. We'd lost our access to YouTube and things like that. It was disheartening to see that YouTube had kind of essentially took down all of RT America's videos, including my entire library, watching the Hawks and all the work we did. And I didn't really feel bad for myself. But I did feel bad for all the good people that we had interviewed over the years, whether they are the activists or experts or, a lot of people who never really got a chance to speak out. One of the aims that we had with that show was to really give voices who aren't normally given platforms a platform. And so there was a lot of folks that you don't get to see on mainstream media a lot, be able to speak their truth. And be able to come on our show and give their perspective or give their opinion of an issue. And so I felt bad for those folks who kind of lost their moment in the sun. I mean, you guys were on too.
Yeah, I have. You're the only person crazy enough to ever invite us on a mainstream news show. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that, Tyrell, because one of the things that, I think just speaks to the extreme integrity of people like you, your father, Chris Hedges, to, talk about a few, is the fact that, you guys kind of knew going into the, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it was like, hey, we know what our line is going to be. Obviously, your father had been down this before. Chris Hedges had been down this road before, right? With the MSNBC or the New York Times, respectively, and all three of you were essentially, hey, we're not going to support this war. Let the chips fall where they may. But as you kind of indicated when you were talking about this, that is not the approach that every commentator has taken to this war and the invasion of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And honestly, it's been quite disappointing to me as somebody that's been following it. It seems like there's been this weird instinct to kind of sympathize with Russia in a way that, I'm not comfortable with. And I'm wondering, did you notice that? And what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you've seen cycle through in the past? Or is this kind of a newer phenomenon that you're now just experiencing?
Well, I think it honestly, I think it kind of comes from that element of, there's a lot of folks who want to be counter to the narrative, just to be counter to the narrative, like do or die. I'm always going to be counter to the narrative, which is fine, and it's not like it's fine to look for justifications. It's good to see, okay, well, why did Russia feel that this was the move for them to make? You never want to paint the world in good or evil and black and white like that. You want to figure out and you want to say, okay, how do I educate myself? Why would this country choose to invade this country? And then you want to look at it from their perspective. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, you should. However, in the process of that, it doesn't mean that you then have to automatically condone the action. Understanding why a country did something doesn't mean that you then have to say, okay, well, I automatically condone it, or I'm not going to look at the atrocities that they might commit, whether they were justified or not. You still have to look at the bad that they do as well. If you're truly someone who says, I stand for peace, or I stand for, nonviolence. You have to do that, but you always see that. And I think that a lot of people kind of jump on this thing of well, I automatically have to be against what the mainstream says. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't always be, you never want to be a mainstream cheerleader, because at the end of the day, they're going to put out just as much, as we mentioned earlier, disinformation as the quote unquote bad guys. So, that educating yourself on the who's and the whys and the whats as to why Russia did what they did is important. But at the same time, to me, there's no justification for invading a country. Everything can be solved through peace. Everything can be solved through talking out issues. You can see that within your own life on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, is it easier to just punch somebody in the face if they disagree with you or if they do something? Of course. But we don't do that because we're right-minded, peaceful people. Say, you know what, I'd rather just sit down and talk out the issues, see if we can come to an understanding. I'm not going to just go into my neighbor's yard or my neighbor's apartment and say, hey, I don't like what you did, so I'm going to take your shit.
Right. No, that's such a good point. And it's obviously true, as you mentioned, that there's always going to be a justification that's out there for any heinous act. I mean, if you think about it, there's a pretty good justification for what Al-Qaeda did on 9/11, assuming that they actually were the ones that did that and it wasn't the U.S. government. But, given the U.S.'s involvement, meddling in war crimes in the Middle East, I mean, it makes sense what happened there. That also doesn't excuse the murder of over 3,000 people that happened on that day. In the same way, there's a justification for our involvement in the Middle East. You would look at 9/11 and say, well, the U.S. was just responding to terrorist threats from these, terrorists in the Middle East. We had to go and start a war. That was the justification that a lot of people went along with and used to apologize for and defend the United States government. And of course, in this instance too, Russia has its reasons. They should be looked at and understood. But that doesn't necessarily excuse the literal war crimes that are happening on the ground. The fact that people are having to, flee their homes, are being displaced, are dying, et cetera, et cetera.
And the same way that, like, look, even the person being attacked, you have to also say, okay, like, are they crossing any lines and things like that? There's no winner in war. There's no good side in war, because ultimately when it breaks down to that level, you're talking about primal human nature. You're talking about the worst aspects of ourselves. So you're going to see horrible acts committed by both sides. And there is no justification for it. That's why I like to use the word motivation. All right, what motivated these people to do this? What motivated, this group, whether it's Russia and Ukraine or whatever it is, what's the motivating factor? Why are they doing what they're doing? But none of that ever justifies violence committed by either side.
Yeah. Speaking of motivations and justifications, have you heard any of these reports out there that Putin might be in a weird health situation? Maybe he has cancer or Parkinson's or some like terminal illness that's like maybe affecting his thinking in a weird way.
I mean, I don't have any firsthand insider knowledge. I don't, apart from working at RT America.
Right.
Tragically, I didn't have a phone line at my desk that let me call up Putin every day and say, hey, Vlad, how you doing today?
How you feeling, bro?
Yeah. Look, anytime you have leaders that get up into their late 60s, 70s, 80s, and you have to start questioning. And you have to start asking, like, are they mentally or physically fit? Because you got to look at your own family. My dad said it numerous times. Our last election, we had two people running who are well into their 70s. Well, there's a certain point where, like my father said, his father died in his mid 80s, and my dad's like, I wouldn't want my 80-year-old father to make decisions that affect, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. There's a certain point where you have to look at that and say, okay, is this person really all there? Yeah. We deal with that in our own lives. Just do we let grandma keep her car keys?
Exactly. I was saying that the other day. Yeah. And not only is it that these people are making, important decisions, people like Putin or really any world leader that's the head of a major superpower like the United States or Russia or whatever. But I mean, just to entertain the idea, what if someone like Putin did have a terminal illness? He knows he has a couple years left to live. He's in control of nuclear weapons. He seemingly has these, grand ideas about making the USSR come back, and he feels very. He has all these, notions of historical prominence and stuff. I don't want that guy in charge of nuclear weapons. I mean, who knows what he's going to do on the way out? Or Kim Jong-un, or anyone, Donald Trump. It's crazy.
I don't want half our leaders in charge of our nuclear weapons right now, because you look at the average age of Congress here in the States, and it's staggering. I mean, look at the Supreme Court, which has been in the news right now. Why do we still have lifetime appointments when it comes to the Supreme Court? That's ridiculous to me.
Tyrell, you don't understand. It allows them to stay apolitical.
No, it doesn't. Right? I mean, come on. To me, it's like when you're looking at it going like, wait, so this person who's like pushing 80 whether you agree with them or not, you're saying this person 80, 85 years old, as they get up there 75, and I don't mean to be ageist. Look, there's a lot of really brilliant people who are in their 70s, 80s, even 90s and things like that are brilliant. Their minds are fantastic, but there's still a certain point where you have to say, is it better for them to be the wise old man or wise old woman that you go talk to, and maybe get some advice from, rather than putting them in a position where they have to sit and make decisions every day that affect millions upon millions and millions of people. There's a big difference between those two things. Doesn't mean you exclude them because of their age, but at the same time, you don't have to necessarily give them a job. Retirement is the reason we have retirement. You retire at 65, right? I wish we would have something similar to that in our own country and in other countries around the world where, look, after a certain age, a politician should step aside, and say, you know what, I've reached a point where culture, society is going to move beyond me. That's the tragic aspect of 80. I'm 40 years old. I'm middle-aged. There's shit going on today I don't understand that 20-somethings are doing that I'm like, man, that's wild. Never would have thought of that, and I applaud it. But, but yeah, there's a certain point where you just have to ask your leaders or people in those positions to kind of say, look, if you're going to make your government employees retire at 65, well,
why is Dianne Feinstein still a senator?
I mean, I remember the days of Strom Thurmond, where like back in the 90s, where they were like wheeling Strom Thurmond up, and he had like an IV attached to him in a wheelchair, and they're like wheeling him into the Senate.
Somebody should have pushed that man down the stairs.
Sorry. You're going like, how's this dude? Does he even know what's happening at this point in time? He just push a button? Like, I mean, come on.
People who don't know, I just made that joke because Strom Thurmond was an arch segregationist piece of shit, not just an old man.
Horrible.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, Strom was not a winner by any stretch of the imagination.
He was good friends with Joe Biden, though. So quickly wanted to shout out a few super chats. Thank you so much, Matt Ocelot. Just learned about the Franklin credit scandal. Chapo just did an episode on it. I would definitely be interested in checking out that episode. I don't always listen to Chapo, but when I do, usually pretty impressed. So definitely would be interested in that one. And you're kind of into that one, Zach, right?
Yeah, I have the book downstairs for it, The Franklin Scandal by Nick Bryant. Happened in Omaha, Nebraska. My homie lives in Omaha. I've been to the area where this shit all allegedly went down. It is like a really known urban legend in Omaha. Or it's not an urban legend. It's just a reality of a child sex predation that was going on there. Never was prosecuted. There's a bunch of shady stuff that you can go into. It's probably like, some sort of an affiliate of what was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. Although, it's stuff that you can't really prove. Tyrell, you're not in you've heard about this before, I imagine.
I've read that book as well, and I've interviewed Nick Bryant a few times.
No way.
Over the years. Yeah. And it's one of those stories where, man, you read that book, as I'm sure you read the book, and it's a page turner. I mean, whether it's 100% real or 80% or 50 or 30, you're just sitting there like, wow, this is incredible. And the way Nick writes the book, there's parts of it especially that seem very plausible, of the way, not so much in folks trying to protect pedophiles for being pedophiles, but in the way power insulates itself, to where someone could be a horrible human being, but because they're in a position of power, they have a natural insulation to where they're never going to be held accountable to the actions that they may commit outside of the job that's given them so much power, or how they use that job to, exercise these horrible aspects, these awful aspects of themselves, and this kind of predation of children. No, the Franklin scandal is one of those ones where, boy, you read it and it just makes your skin crawl. But there's enough there to where you're saying like, well, it's hard to prove that it happened. There's a lot of witnesses that say it did. There's a lot of really shady aspects that went on with that, and I suggest people to look it up and get into it. It does kind of veer into a weird kind of thing of like, devil worship, I think, if I remember at one point, and there was a lot of different kind of like elements going on there. But that wasn't the main thrust of the story. Really, the main thrust of the story was about, a very insulated group of powerful individuals in Omaha that then had also connections to, I think, the National Republican Party at the time, all the way up to even the White House. And, there's a little bit of fire amidst all the smoke. And I think Nick did a good job of kind of laying that out.
I'm going to have to check that book out. That sounds fascinating.
It's a page turner. I mean, you read it and you're just like, it's like reading a horror story. It's like it reminded me of the first time I read the book Communion by Whitley Strieber.
Interesting.
Which is about his alien abductions.
Oh, well, Hold that because we're about to get into aliens, Terrell. I want to
Uh-oh.
get your opinion. But thank you so much, Matt Ocelot God, for the $5. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much, also Christina, for the $9.99. Great show as always. Zach, you were right yesterday. Zach is not MSM, even though he's totally bland now.
Yeah, Kyle's not. I am MSM, Gavin. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to bust your balls yesterday, Christine. I was just trying to make the case that even though you might not have a taste or affinity for Kyle Kulinski, to compare him to the mainstream media just does a disservice to the new media, just because he, you know, it would basically pacify or dilute what's like the kind of problematic shit that, you know, Morning Joe is pushing off to everybody. But yeah, if you, you know, I mean, would I give the most ardent pushback on the fact that his show's a little bland? No, everybody has their own taste. So thank you so much for the $10, Christina. No hard feelings, obviously.
Yeah, thanks so much, Christina. And yeah, Tyrell, really excited to get your opinion on this one. It seemed like maybe 6 months to a year ago, UFOs were all the rage. Everyone was talking about this. And then it went away for a while. But the other day, there was a House hearing in which videos of unexplained aerial sightings were revealed. As it says in this New York Times article, the highlight of the hearing was a split-second image shot last year through the window of an FA-18 fighter jet of a spherical object in the distance. The pilot also reported observing an object. It remains unexplained and is an example of how difficult it is to determine what a short video clip may show. So it looks like another one of these videos. It's probably kind of low quality, kind of grainy, but potentially showing a UFO. I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, Tyrell, but what's your opinion on all this? Do you think that it's, just a ploy to get more money for the military industrial complex, or do you think there's some there? What's your take on all this? I
mean, it might end up being a combination of both. It might be something where, there's a lot of unexplained aerial phenomenon going on with what people are seeing in the skies has been with us for a long time now. It's an old story when it comes to the UFO phenomenon and things of that nature. At the same time, do I put it past, the military industrial complex to say, ooh, good way to justify Space Force, good way to sink some more billions into the old Pentagon. Hey, UFOs, they might be real. Give us a check. At the same time, look, I'll be honest with you guys. When I was working on the show Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, they sent me to Skinwalker Ranch as part of one of those shows. For those who are familiar with it, there's a TV show on the History Channel that kind of was one of those docu-series that covers it. And I believe that there is alien life in the universe, because I think it was Carl Sagan or one of the great minds that said if there wasn't life out there, it'd be an awful waste of space. And so I do definitely feel that we're not the only things. I mean, it'd be surprising to me if we're not the only life in existence. How do I feel about it? Well, I mean, I went to that ranch for that show, and I did see something to this day that I cannot explain. Like totally soberly, not somebody who's big into that world. I did see something in the sky that to this day I can't explain. And the best way I can describe it is when you see something that you really don't know what it is, your brain kind of turns into the iMac pinwheel of death, where you kind of just go like, I'm trying to figure out what I'm looking at, but I can't figure it out. And it's affecting. Is there a lot of bullshit in the UFO community? Of course, a lot of bullshit in a lot of communities, but I think amidst all that, I think there's some very real truth there. I think there is things that go on. I mean, and then also the flip side too. I mean, you can go a million different directions with this, because look, what DARPA does and some of the advanced research that governments and military, and especially corporate, the military industrial complex does, they're 20 years ahead of what we know they have today. A lot of people in that industry will tell you that, like, where they're at technology wise might be 20, 30 years past what we're familiar with today. And so you could also have an aspect of that into a lot of these sightings too, whether it's our own stuff or in other countries. I mean, there's a million different roads to go down when it comes to this. But I think there's always going to be that small percentage that is unexplainable. And I think it is worthwhile looking into. Why not? I mean, the very nature of human beings is curious, and we want to discover what's undiscovered. And we want to, dig in and try to figure out what we don't understand. And I think it's a worthwhile avenue to explore. I mean, obviously, there's very real world issues affecting us on a daily basis that we need to solve before we get to that.
When you talk about the mysterious nature of human beings themselves, are you referencing any of the like consciousness accelerator theories about UFOs coming down in the early days of man?
Well, the interesting, yeah, I mean, I've read those things too, and I've seen those documentaries on like the, on the pyramids and things like that. Like, how did we actually create the pyramids? What were they used for and things like that. But it's hard. There's no one expert that can say definitively this is what happened. Why? Because it happened 1,000 years ago. So we're never really gonna know. I mean,
I don't know, man. I heard this one guy on the Joe Rogan podcast once,
but it's great to explore it, right? But it's still a fun kind of, mental experiment just to go down that road, just to see what might make sense or what doesn't. So
that's what that's what I do kind of hate about the internet. If there was one thing, I feel like from what TV and cinema has taught me, right? In the 90s, it used to be way cooler just to go down this kind of a rabbit hole. And now everybody gets all up in art. Like now you'll just Google it and it'll be like, see, this is what the official but you can't just be like, actually, man, I'm pretty sure all of society existed before. And then the aliens took it away and gave it back, man. Like that would just be like, oh, no way to, just refute that.
I mean,
right?
I'll put it to you like this. One of the worst things to ever happen to humanity, I think, in terms of knowledge and understanding our own history was the burning of the Alexandria Library. Because I think we lost so much information about ancient cultures in the burning of that library that, it's hard for us to look back and understand. And I think, obviously, like, there's a million different interpretations of if you dig something up out of the ground or you're looking at how an ancient people did things, you can find a million different interpretations of this. But like all good science, you're kind of going from, okay, this is our best logical guess right now. The key is you have to always maintain a certain amount of openness to say, but we could find out more, and when we do find out more, we have to be open to that. So that's kind of where I'll go with that. Do I think that ancient aliens created the pyramids? I don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment.
Be kind of cool if they did, man.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I saw a great piece the other day that somebody had said that one of the, talking about now we're going into a crazy, wonderful place, but one of the things that may have accelerated humans to kind of develop culture and to kind of lift ourselves out of the Neanderthal era was the eating of psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah, the stoned ape theory.
Yeah, that to me is a fascinating thing to go down.
Agreed.
And for anyone that's tried them, not that I recommend or for anyone that's tried them, you kind of think like, that's kind of logical. I could see consciousness being an elevation, a forward progress of consciousness and self-consciousness coming from that.
And then you add on top of that the theory that psilocybin itself is is a spore that came from an asteroid from outer space. Yeah.
There's a rabbit hole to go down, my man.
Yeah, and those are all fun thought experiments.
Agreed.
And I think having fun thought experiments just for the sake of it, well, that's where progress comes from.
Yeah.
Somebody needed to have the wild thought experiment to say, hey, I bet we could figure out a way to fly. No, man,
True.
Crazy.
Or I bet I could convince everybody this one religion.
Right. You've got, in order for human progress to occur, you've got to have an open dialogue for people to say and pontificate wild shit, because that's how you create progress. And
is that real? Can somebody verify that? Did they find THC on meteors? I don't know if that's a conspiracy.
Psilocybin, you mean?
Oh, somebody said THC.
Tardigrades.
If that came from space, then I'm really invested in this.
I've never heard THC. What I have heard is the theory that psilocybin came as a spore on a meteorite from outer space, so it's kind of like an alien substance.
Well, I mean, it's all fungus based, right?
Right.
It's like the magical world of fungus and mushrooms and things like that. And some of the studies that you've seen done now on that, element of species on the planet is fascinating. When you see, I think it was there's a Netflix documentary on it, and there's some Paul Stamets, I think his name is, does a lot of incredible work when you dig into that particular element of our planet. And so, you have to leave yourself open to ideas. It doesn't mean that just because you have that thought experiment that you need to be labeled as, somebody who's like crazy and shouldn't be listened to, or, oh, look how crazy, because there's a difference between saying, no, I totally believe in this is what happened, and aliens are responsible for it all, than someone saying, hey man, let's have a thought experiment, let's see where that takes us.
Right. And it's just fun to talk about. I mean, at very least. But yeah, apparently, I think I read at one point that psilocybin can actually survive in deep space, like the spore, the fungus or whatever. So that's part of where that theory comes from.
It's
Again,
like I
not that
said,
I
like
actually believe it.
psilocybin and tardigrades are going to be like
Right.
the future of life, you know, as it expands, you know, because tardigrades are incredible to me. Those little things that you can literally put into the
indestructible.
vacuum of space and
Yeah.
they survive. You know?
Anyway, thanks so much for the super chat, Red Robin. And thank you also, Ariana, for the super chat. A couple other things we wanted to quickly get your opinion on, Tyrell, before we get out of here for
George
today. One that you might have I think you might have just referenced it, is this absolutely insane video of George Bush from the other day. Zach and I reacted to this on Call-In on our show over there yesterday, but wanted to get your reaction to this too, Tyrell. I'm sure most people in our audience have seen this one, but in case you haven't, buckle up because it's fucking insane.
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq. Anyway, 75.
Well, yeah. What's your thought on that, man?
I love Freudian slips. On a long enough timeline, the truth will always come out. You know, clearly that was somewhere in his brain, that he knew the truth there. I mean, there's so much garbage in that statement, you know, because it's like, oh, well, people aren't allowed to vote. Well, what the fuck is gerrymandering? You know, what's been done to most of the U.S. to very significant minority populations in the U.S. You do everything they can to keep that group of people from voting because you don't like how they vote. That happens all the time. But specifically to the Iraq invasion thing, you know, I mean, they know what they did. The fact that it leaks out because he's 75 and things like that, they all know what they did. We all know what they did. It's not a secret anymore. It's not something that I mean, who here believes, I mean, legitimately, what right-thinking person in this day and age legitimately believes our justifications for going into Iraq, that they weren't trumped up, that they weren't, you know, elevated to justify going in, and the reasons that we went in were not the reasons that they told the public. I mean, come on, you know. But yeah, but I was brilliant. I saw that the other day, and I'm happy to have heard him say it.
And I'll be happy to see if he dies in prison, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
I think you don't hold your breath, man. Don't hold. I like you too much, Zach. Don't hold your breath. But no, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like you know, anytime, like it's first, like someone who follows like the JFK assassination or other elements that we know, not even have to be conspiracies, but you know, things that the government's done and then covered up. Eventually, they always come to light. On a long enough timeline, eventually things come to light. Might not be the timeline we prefer for us who are like, you know, fighting for truth and fighting to make the world a better place, but eventually it always comes out, and a lot of times it'll come out in little snippets, as we just saw. I mean,
When do you think we're going to find out the truth about JFK, Tyrell? How much longer are we going to have to wait?
You know, honestly, I think if anybody who does the actual research into it and looks at what like, you know, they've uncovered with the records that have been produced, with the records that still survive, and what witnesses have said, you know, and things like that, we kind of know what happened that day. It's never, I don't think you're ever going to see a government, especially knowing that our own government, in my belief, played a very direct hand in killing John Kennedy. You're never going to have somebody suddenly come out and say like, yeah, okay, yeah, we did that. But I think that there's a certain point where we already kind of won with that. I mean, majority of Americans believe that there was a conspiracy surrounding his death. A majority of Americans believe Oswald was not the person, or at least was a part of that conspiracy that killed him. That there is the win. You know, it's also kind of looking at, when you look at things like this, you also have to say like, okay, there's the unbelievable, which yes, suddenly, you know, the government comes out, Joe Biden comes on TV tomorrow and says, yes, man, you know, Alan Dulles, he played a major factor in killing John Kennedy. We admit to that. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So you have to kind of reevaluate what your goalposts are for the win. And the fact that a majority of the country believes that there was a conspiracy, that doesn't believe the Warren Commission, I think that's your win. And moving forward, that's how you kind of have to look at certain things. That's where you have to find your like, okay, yeah, we've accomplished that.
And it kind of explains why the United States population doesn't want a Ministry of Truth or the government being able to decide what's true and what's not. Because I mean, as you mentioned, the conspiracy theorists kind of won out on so many occasions, right? And I mean, we even got to talk to your old man about 9/11, right? And he was like, "What do people your age think about 9/11?" We were like, "Come on, man!" And he was like, "Oh, great, we won that battle too." You know what I mean? It was like,
and I can tell you that affected him a lot. I mean, after that interview that he had with you guys, and hearing a younger generation for him say, "Oh no, yeah, we don't know what happened, but we definitely don't buy what we were told." That meant a lot to him. Because, as somebody who's always been kind of fighting for, the truth to come out, and I know truth is a subjective word, but, for someone who spent their career trying to uncover and fight to get, to the root of what actually happened with major historical events that affect us still to this day, that affect policy to this day, it's good to hear. That meant a lot to him hearing you guys say that. And I think that's what I mean about setting those goalposts to the right example. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to get the government to admit the wrongs that they did. It just means that we have to get a majority of people to understand what happened. You look at today and you see people trying to whitewash the imprisonment of Japanese Americans in 1944, back in World War II, where people are, oh, we don't want that in the textbook, or, oh, we don't want this in the textbook. And to me, that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly do. You have to look at the bad that your society, your government, and I think that's the other thing too. It's very easy, I think, today for people to kind of get into this headspace that there's the government and then there's us. Look, at the end of the day, they're the same thing. In our society, the government is us. It is a reflection of us. I think it was George Carlin had that great bit where he said, garbage in, garbage out. We're still voting for these people. The vote still does work. We're still actually electing the people that we elect. And we have to stop having this ideology that somehow we're two separate entities. Now, we are in the sense of who they represent when they're in office. But at the end of the day, the government is still us. And that, because I think that when you separate the two and you create the government as this big, large entity that's separate from all of us, that makes it harder to change. It automatically kind of creates a defeatism. Whereas if you look at the government for what it is, it's made up of a vast amount of individuals who are our friends and neighbors, or our enemies and neighbors, but it's still made up of the people of this country, meaning that allows us to have the mindset that we can change it for the better. And I think the more we get codified into this kind of us versus them mentality, especially when it comes to our government, that's very defeatist, because then that creates, if you follow what I'm saying, it creates a separation that then makes it seem like this entity that's unmovable and unchangeable.
That's such a great point too about the Japanese internment camps and how a lot of American citizens don't even really understand or know about how that was happening. And of course, we always hear never again about the Holocaust and what happened in Germany and how they were the bad guys in that situation, which obviously they were. But there is a lack of coming to terms with what we were doing in America at that time, and how in some ways it mirrored what was going on there with the rounding up of one ethnic minority into camps. I mean, obviously what happened in those internment camps was not anywhere near as horrible as what happened in Auschwitz and the other Holocausts, but we should probably come to terms with and at least know about that part of our history, because it's evil.
Yeah, and it's not taught at all in school, right? How many years, Gavin, in the Midwest do we get of U.S. history? I think it's like fucking 5 different years in school where they teach you explicitly about U.S. history and nothing else. Never once is that brought up. You get like 5 sentences on the Trail of Tears, and then oh yeah, slavery was really bad. We fucked up on that, and that's like our reckoning with our past, right? Like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have genocided every Native American, but that's as far as we will go. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. Because look, I mean it's the old adage we've heard 1,001 times: is if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it. And we see it constantly in our lives of the same kind of mistakes being made over and over again. And when you look at the reasons as to why we make those mistakes, at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to two reasons: the insulation of power and fear. And until we get past the fear, the kind of fear reaction to what happens, because whenever you're afraid, that's when you're going to be manipulated. Because your natural instinct is, okay, I need to be protected. How do I protect myself? I don't want to be afraid anymore. And that's where then you get the insulation of power. That's where then those who are seeking to gain power will then insulate themselves by using fear, as we all know. And that's tragically why you see so much of history repeated, is that, they'll use, whether it's using the Native Americans as, we're coming to shore and we're planting our flag and saying, this is this, but we have to be scared of those people over there. In order to get our land and be afraid of them. And that's where you get those horrible stereotypes and all those horrible things kind of arise out of, is that using fear to control a populace, or using fear to justify heinous action.
Yep.
And I think that's, you have to be, if you're not learning that in history, then you're never going to, in history class, then you're not going to see it for what it is in front of you when it's happening today.
That sounds like
Absolutely.
design, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know Zach does have to get out of here. He has to get to his other job. So we're probably not going to have time to get to the Elon Musk stuff. I am interested in maybe talking a little bit about that with you and your dad when you guys come on next. Just would love to get your opinion on not only some of the more recent controversies, but also this prospect of him buying Twitter and now seemingly backing out. So again, maybe we can have that conversation next time, hopefully. But either way, it was so great to chat with you again, Tyrell. Always such a pleasure. Please let everyone know where they can find you or hear you now. I know a couple of people were asking about that since you're no longer on RT America, but yeah, anything you want to, say or plug, feel free.
Well, big things are in the horizon, and stay tuned here. And also, follow my father and I on Twitter. We're pretty easy to find. I'm so proud I don't have a blue check mark either. My dad has one, but I don't. You can follow us on Twitter and on Facebook and the normal avenues of social media and things like that. But we have big things coming up through Substack in the works, and you'll hear much more about that as the weeks progress. We're also on Clubhouse as well. Me and Jesse co-host a club there on Sunday and Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time. So you can kind of find us there, but definitely keep your ear to the ground, because we are in the next few weeks. We have a lot of big things coming up, not only in the next few weeks, but even bigger as the year progresses. A lot of really cool stuff coming down the pipeline.
Super excited to watch all that, and obviously it's always great to chat with you, Tyrell. You got a permanent home on the Vanguard. We always love chatting with you. It's always a great time, and always appreciate your insight. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tyrell. Really appreciate chatting, as always, with good friend of the show, Tyrell. And again, stay tuned, guys. We're going to have Tyrell and his father, the governor, Jesse Ventura, back on the Vanguard soon. So, stay tuned for that. Some exciting announcements and all that coming. Huge shout out to the patrons. Before we get out of here, you guys know what's up. We like to thank our patrons at the beginning and end of every single live stream for making this show possible. So yeah, this is what that is. Huge shout out to you guys. Links in the description if you guys want to join the patron community, support the show. That's a good way to do it. There's also a PayPal link in the description if you're feeling extra generous. But yeah, thanks again, Tyrell, for coming on today. Really enjoyed the chat. Looking forward to speaking again in the near future. And thanks everyone for tuning in, for the kind comments in the chat. Really appreciate hearing from you guys. Anything you wanted to say, Zach, before we get on out of here?
No, just wrap up the housekeeping. Appreciate everybody that keeps our lights on, keeps our internet running, all that. You wonderful Patreon supporters. If you can't support us via Patreon, that's okay. Just hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, all that jazz. You guys know what to do. And special shout out to Tyrell. Always a fucking blast talking to that dude. Always gives such good, insightful answers, and just all around great guy. So always fun time. So everybody take care. We're getting the fuck out of here, and we'll probably see you tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Peace out, and have a great rest of your Friday.